Hey guys, this is a repost of a video that I had posted a while ago when I first got my first set of Warren manually locking hubs. And I took that video down because I made a mistake in the location of the snap ring when I installed it. And I don't want to have bad information floating out on the internet for other people to make the same mistakes. So I got to give a shout out to DViper20 who pointed out that I had the snap ring in the groove on the axle closer to the bearings as opposed to outboards retaining the hub. And I think that probably had a large impact on the fact that I was seeing failures. So I will say that this interaction with Warren customer service has absolutely been great. They responded quickly and got me a new set of hubs in the mail, overnighted, no questions asked. I am going to go ahead and update the installation, and I'm going to install this exactly 100% as the instructions say, even with the studs and the lock nuts instead of the cap screws that I had used previously. If I ever have another hub failure, I want to be able to say with 100% certainty that it was installed absolutely correct as Warren intended, but hopefully I will never have to use their warranty again. So the studs are symmetrical, so I went ahead and hand tightened the lock nut on just the first couple threads until you get the locking mechanism that adds the resistance. And I'm just going to use some blue Loctite on the end that's going to thread into the hub. So I'm just going to thread the end of this stud into the hub as much as you can before you hit either the resistance from pushing the stud all the way into the back of the hub or until you can't twist the lock nut anymore. Ideally, when you put a wrench on it when you're installing the actual hub, the friction of the locking mechanism on the nut will actually drive the stud to the back of the hub before it actually pushes the nut down on the threads. So now that you have your studs in, they're not dried yet because you're going to do the final tightening with the wrench. Go ahead and just grab the axle shaft and just pull it out to make sure that any end play, it's as far outboard as it can get. That'll just make sure that you have enough room to put the snap ring on. Then you're going to take the hub without the top and go ahead and just slide it onto the studs. Now that you have the hub in place, we're going to put the hardware on. There's a flat washer, so I'm going to put the flat washer around the stud. And then you can go ahead and get the lock nut started on the studs again, and then you can use the wrench to drive them home. With the cap off, you actually have excellent access for using an extension here, so that makes it pretty easy to get to the hardware. And again, the friction of the locking mechanism on the lock nut is going to thread the stud into the hub before it starts driving the nut down the stud. So because the nut is already a lock nut with a locking mechanism inside the actual threads, I didn't use any type of liquid Loctite on it. The studs actually worked out pretty well, but I will say that maybe just because I'm OCD, it was a little aggravating that I've got one stud here that's sticking out further than the rest. It looked like it hit some resistance in the back of the actual threaded hole that was tapped into the hub. Now this might be hard to see on the actual camera, but on the end of that splined axle shaft is a groove in there. And it sticks out just enough so that you can fit the snap ring on the very end of the axle shaft, and that'll actually retain that inner collar that I was having trouble with. So that should take some of the load off of the snap ring on the actual hub side. So you're just going to have to use your snap ring pliers and spread the ring out and slide it over the axle shaft, and then just take the ends of the pliers and try and push it back until it pops into the slot. So this might be a little difficult to see, but once you get the snap ring in place, you can check it by grabbing the hooks, and it should be able to spin freely, and there should be no binding or resistance. And of course, on the underside of the cap, there is a little post right here, and there is a notch underneath one of the mounting holes for that post to go through. So the gasket actually is directional. You want to make sure the post on the cap also lines up with one of the openings on the inside of the actual hub body. And so you can use a 5/32 Allen wrench, and you can go ahead and get it started. So on the final assembly, the torque for the studs and the lock nuts is going to be 17 to 19 foot-pounds. The torque for the cap bolts that hold the cap assembly on is a much lighter torque. That's at 45 to 50 inch-pounds. So not a lot of torque is needed to hold this on. So now that it's all assembled, engage, disengage, feel for a positive detent and a nice pop as it disengages. Now I'm hoping that this worn hub will last me quite a bit longer than my other ones. Seriously though, look how small these instructions are. I've got bad eyes. I can't see the order of things in this little diagram here. And as you read through it, oh, on the back side you have to turn the page and read the fine print here that says that you need to put the retaining ring on the end of the axle shaft if the axle shaft has a groove that extends beyond that locking gear there. If it doesn't, on some applications it doesn't, then you either don't put anything there or you have a little spacer or an extra bolt that bolts into the end of that axle shaft. So I think that was a mistake on my part, but I gotta say that Warn definitely above and beyond with their customer service when it's all said and done. And I'm glad that I figured out what the problem was. So thanks to DViper20 for pointing out that retaining ring. I had it flip-flopped, and I think that's what was causing all my issues.